on that day, you uttered words that you had said before. I'm sure there are many times you had said, I do before. Right?
Yes.
That was not the first time you had said, I do in your life.
No.
But it was the first time you had said, I do in that context and under those conditions. Unless this was your second or third marriage.
No, that was the first time in that context and condition.
Okay. So after you said those words that day, you were essentially married based on saying, I do. You could not just go out and say, I do not, and your marriage is annulled.
Correct.
Okay? So my point is, on that day, which was the event, you got married. But since 1998, your understanding of that event has probably changed. Okay? Because that event ended that day. That wedding ceremony ended that day. But your marriage did not.
Correct.
Your marriage continued. The event didn't perdure. The event vanished. But the meaning of the event endures or perdures.
You have James, the brother of Jesus, and Peter together. They're leading the church primarily out of Jerusalem. You also have the Apostle John, who's a part of this group. And you also have Jude, the brother of Jesus. And then you have the Pauline tradition. There is varying degrees of mutual respect between the two.
Jerry, let me move this chair.
Paul certainly shows far more respect for James and Peter and John and Jude than Peter shows for Paul. There's an enduring tension there. Paul refers to both Peter and John as the two pillars of the church. Of course, there's a myriad of issues here between Peter and Paul. One is that, understandably, Peter, to a great degree, still views Paul as the one who hunted early Christians, who hunted early believers. Peter's definition of an apostle is someone who saw Jesus during his earthly ministry, who also was a witness of his signs, of his miracles, but also saw him resurrected. Only two people fit that category for Peter, according to what Luke gives us in the first chapter of the Acts of the Apostles. And that was two people, Justus and Matthias. And then Peter goes away and he prays, and then God says, of these two men, which one shall replace Judas? So the fact that Paul describes himself as an apostle, and also is the only figure in the entire New Testament to refer to women as apostles, as he does, and the very last thing we have from him are his 27 verses in the 16th chapter of his epistle to the church in Rome. He refers to women as apostles, his sisters in Christ, his co-laborers who were in Christ before he was. But also when we look at Paul, the beginning of Paul's ministry in 1 Corinthians, it's very clear that he sees mutuality between genders. In fact, he sees an erasure of genders determining who leads in the church. So it's not only that there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither man nor woman, and so forth. But not only that, Paul also sees that many of the covenantal rites and rituals that were required under the previous covenant, which were now provisional, as a result of the crucifixion and the resurrection, have been now fulfilled. Hence, circumcision is no longer needed, and so forth. So, whenever we read Galatians, we see Paul referring to the circumcised. He's referring to what we call Judaizers. Individuals who taught that even though you accepted Jesus, you still have to be circumcised, you still have to go through the Mosaic rites, the Levitical rites, you must live according to the holiness code, which is Leviticus chapters 17 through 26. And Paul is saying that defeats the purpose of the cross. It is his blood that does away with the need for all of that. This was provisional, but now the law has been fulfilled in Christ. The law of Christ is love, it's not of rituals and so forth. That's what's happening in Galatians. And Paul is saying, I give you this not by human authority, I give you this by divine authority. And for Peter, that's a problem. Because Peter's response is, well, he appointed me personally to lead the church. I was there on Pentecost and preached the first Christian sermon in the history of the church. So we have here the classic case of, it's not either or. It's both and, in context, understanding why that tension is there. But all of this is proto-Orthodox. Then there comes this tradition that if we were to draw a diagram of it, looks like this. It looks kind of messy because it was messy. And in this group, we call them Gnostics, which comes from gnosis. This understanding that knowledge gave power, that knowledge alone brought about divinity. And then we also have Docetism. Again, Docetism, this teaching that Jesus did not exist in a physical form. And the leaders of these churches, primarily to a great degree, were women who were also episkopos.
This is all in proto-Orthodox.
So now we're outside, now we're so over here we're non-proto-Orthodox. Also known as demiurgical. So this word episkopos, translated as overseer or manager, is best understood as bishop. Paul himself only used the word one time in his authentic epistles, and by authentic, we're referring to Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Philippians, Galatians, Philemon, and we say authentic because when we read Luke's account, so Luke and Acts are one book, when we read his chronology of his missionary journeys, we're able to verify, especially based upon how those parchments are put together. Because for instance, 1 Corinthians is not one letter, it's a collection of letters, and 2 Corinthians is a collection of letters. We're able to look at the chronology that Luke gives us. We're able to look at what Paul himself is saying about where he's going and where he's been. And we're able to line them up to say, based on that and the consistent use of language, the consistent use of the way that he uses language. Whereas when we read 1st and 2nd Timothy, we find things such as the mystery of this religion. Paul never referred to following Jesus as a religion. Decades after the crucifixion, the way we view religion now is not the way it was viewed then. You were a follower of Jesus. You were a follower of the way. You were a member of the way. The idea that there would be set protocol and what we now call doctrine, that happens decades after Paul's death. So the fact that 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus now reflect a very organized structure where there are bishops who have certain qualifications, deacons have certain qualifications. This is very different from what Luke gives us for the descriptions of deacons and the Acts of the Apostles. We're seeing a far more, again, proto-Orthodox, on the verge of becoming the Orthodox Church, which would have Catholicity, lowercase c. It would become universal.
Yeah.
So the proto-Orthodox moves us towards this, which is orthodoxy. Orthodoxy meaning right teaching. And again, what made it right teaching was the reason that Mark's gospel, which is written first, although it appears second due to Papias, Eusebius, and then Athanasius. It wasn't his intent to make that particular order official, but that order is now the order we use. The reason Matthew is placed first, primarily, is because there's a birth narrative and there's a genealogy. Matthew also has a Jewish audience, so it satisfies the questions as to why Jesus is the Messiah, according to the way 2nd Chronicles ends. And 2nd Chronicles is the original last book of the Hebrew Bible, whereas ultimately Malachi becomes.
Say that again?
2nd Chronicles is the last book of the Jewish Bible. So if you read the end of 2nd Chronicles, for instance, it ends with the reign of Jeconiah, and Jeconiah is taken into Babylon. Then by reading, so we're reading roughly Matthew's Gospel's genealogy. See Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Of course, Jacob has 12 sons. Judah marries Tamar. They have Peretz. Then from Peretz to Hezron, Aram to Aminadab to Hezron to Nahshon to Salmon, who marries Rahab. Their child is Boaz to Ruth. Obed to Jesse. Jesse 8 sons. Then to David. Then to, of course, Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asaph, Jotham, Uzziah, Jehoshaphat, then Joram, then Ahaz, and then, of course, Hezekiah, Ammon, Josiah, Jeconiah, Salathiel, Zerubbabel, then, let's see, Eliakim, Then we go into Azor, Zadok, Eleazar, and then Eliud, and then Mathan, then Jacob, then Joseph to Mary, to Jesus. It's interesting, those 42 generations. You know, it's interesting, 4 generations get left out. 4 kings are left out. So if you read 1 Kings, there's an interesting story. Jezebel has a daughter by Ahab named Athaliah. And Athaliah marries Joram, who's the king of Judah. And Matthew chooses to leave that out. That says something because Matthew has no problem including David's indiscretion.
Right.
So as to say comparatively, the fact that in that bloodline, we still have Jezebel who marries her daughter off into that bloodline. For that genealogy, for Matthew, he says, we'll exclude that part. Which is really saying something in terms of a reflection upon the legacy of Ahab and Jezebel. That there would not even be a mention there. But if you, in reading 1 Kings and in reading 2 Kings, you notice that that occurs there. So that's why we have Matthew at the beginning of the New Testament, because it gives us that. Mark's gospel, which is written in a very crude form of Greek, it's written very quickly, no birth narrative. It has 3 different endings. Verse 8 of chapter 16 is the original ending. Then we have, that I preached recently, we have a numberless verse. In between verse 8 and verse 9, especially in the NRSV, you have what's called the intermediate ending, shorter ending, numberless verse. It's just Mark 16, non-applicable. So what I'm doing now leading up to Easter, I'm preaching the first word of each ending in descending order. So, and now. Those are the first 3, and that's... So we can see, you know, what each ending is doing, because the first ending says, so, and they fled and told no one for they were afraid.
Hold on, wait, because I'm a preacher too.
Okay, all right, so 16:8, the first word is so. Then we have 16, and there's no number there, and you have and. Then you have 16:9, first word is now.
So wait, how can
What book is this?
Mark.
Gospel of Mark, last chapter.
16, there's,
16:8,
and then what's the next one, 16?
there's no number, it's a numberless verse.
So how do you,
The way that I do it, I just did in the bulletin. I said just do 16. That. If you look up pretty much RSV, NRSV, any modern translation is going to say 9 through 20. 9 through 20 gets added in the year 400.
okay.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yes. The church fathers will go back 4 centuries later to add that. And the main concern was Matthew has such an elaborate ending. The original ending of the Gospel of Mark, verse 8, the very last word is fear. And they fled and told no one, for they were afraid. What's notable is for 15 and a half chapters, they disobeyed Jesus. Jesus told them every time he performed a sign in Mark, go and tell no one. And what did they do? They went and told everyone. Then when he told them not to tell anyone until he's raised. Once he's finally raised, what do? They go home and they tell no one, for they were afraid.
Yeah.
That's a reflection upon human beings.
Wow.
No matter what, even in the presence of seeing God's power, the human tendency to do the opposite. So what's also notable there is...
Wait,
Hold on, slow down,
Doctor.
Can you repeat what you just said?
What Mark shows us is a reflection of human tendencies. It is a reflection of human tendencies that even in the presence of God's miracles, we tend to do the opposite of what we should do. We tend to do the opposite. Here's the best question. Why were they even at the tomb in the first place? They shouldn't have even been there. He was very clear. Meet me where? In Galilee.
To see Galilee.
And yet, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome, they're going to the tomb with what?
Spices.
Oil.
If he's raised, why are they going there? Because
They didn't believe.
Because human beings can become so accustomed to defeat that the readjustment to victory is difficult.
Whoa, hold on.
I heard it.
Human beings can become so accustomed to defeat
Yeah.
that readjusting to victory is difficult.
But does not life cause us to forget what God says at times?
All the time. All the time.
So do you think in light of everything that was going on, they just forgot that he told them, you know?
Well, not only that, this had never happened before and would never happen again.
Right.
I've delivered 111 eulogies. Now, you know, only God knows where those souls have gone, but I can tell you where the bodies are.
Mm-hmm.
They're still there.
Then,
And so for them to go there, they did what is a human tendency. One thing I've learned in my journey with God, God does not make sense.
no.
And that's the best news of all. It makes sense to go to the grave if he's dead.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It makes sense not to come to Virginia Union whenever there's so many other easier things to do in the world besides lead God's people, and anything else is easier than this.
Anything else, though.
When people tell me they have a small church, you know, and I say that from time to time, there's no such thing as a small church. One person is a mess.
One.
Yes, sir.
And if you see 5 in front of you on Sunday, that's at least 100, because every one of those has family, and they have co-workers, and they have problems, and they have a past, and they have a present they're dealing with. One person is a universe all by themselves. You get 5, and you got a whole lot. Because demons love sanctuaries. What happens in Luke whenever Jesus comes in? Son of the Most High.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you here? A demon, knowing what goes on in sanctuaries, is shocked to see that Jesus would come there. Because demons love sanctuaries. I've often said, if I had to define ministry, ministry is a war between good and evil. And in order for evil to win, it has to strike at the heart of good. And where's the heart of good? In God's house. So that's where they want to set up shop, and that's where they want to attack.
We wrestle not against flesh and blood, against principalities.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking about, you know, like when I first encountered ministry, the first thing that I thought of would always be spiritual warfare.
People say spiritual warfare, and I understand what they mean, but my question is often this. I'd be fortunate if I just had spiritual warfare. It's warfare.
Mm-hmm. All out.
It will attack your finances.
Yeah.
It will attack your family first.
Just do this help us.
It will attack everything all at the same time. It's just warfare. In fact, there's a term that's used in the military, total war. It means nothing is off the table. And typically with total warfare, families are first. It means there's no such thing as an innocent population.
Right.
I have found no one is more vulnerable in ministry than the pastor's family.